webinar series. Today's presentation is entitled Executive Webinar Series, Population Health, Using Automated Campaigns to Educate, Support, and Coach Your Whole Population. Our presenter today is Terry Coleman, who is a practice administrator manager at Charleston Internal Medicine. Today's session will be moderated by Adam McCoy, product owner at Vitel. Before we begin, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. First, you have a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can minimize or expand the panel by clicking on the arrow in the upper right-hand corner. Secondly, you can submit questions using the question panel located near the bottom of your screen. We will try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If your question is not answered, we will respond to you individually after the event. And finally, all registrants will receive a copy of today's presentation and a link to the recording within 48 hours after the webinar. The information will be sent to you via email in which you registered for the webinar. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Adam. Adam, you may begin the webinar.
Great, thank you, Renee. Everyone, Terry Coleman and his team at Charleston Internal Medicine have become experts at campaigns and using them in their healthcare initiatives within their practice. And so I'm really excited to turn the time over to Terry. Terry, go ahead.
Hello, I'd like to thank Vitel for giving us the opportunity to kind of tell our success story. We're a small practice, and Vitel has been real instrumental in helping us be successful at engaging our patients to become more involved in their health care. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And the three things that I hope this session will accomplish for the listeners is, one, just give you some basic information of how to use Vitel to engage your patients. Number two, how using both written and voice messaging to achieve that success with your patients. And third, how to determine if the campaigns that you use in your practice are successfully doing what you wanted them to do. Next slide there, Adam. A little bit about Charleston Internal Medicine. It was formed in 2001. We're located in West Virginia. We have a total of 8 providers, including mid-levels. We employ our own hospitalists. We do have internists and family practice. We have a total of 12 staff members that support those providers. We see an average of about 110 to 140 patients a day, and we are a designated Level 3 patient-centered medical home in our community. Next slide. Some of the services that we do in-house, you can see listed there. I'm not going to go through those, but we use Vitel to incorporate patients into using some of our services, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later and show you how we've done that. So we do a lot of things in-house and for our patients, so our patients really like that. Next slide. And the big question, everyone's going to want to know is, how does Charleston Internal Medicine use Vitel within our organization? And the way we do that is probably the same way that you get major projects done in your particular operation, and that is we employ someone that looks very similar to this, the genie, the magic genie. For us, the magic genie in our office, his name is Garrett, and Garrett was given the task of making Vitel successful in our office. And so with Garrett's magic hands and the magic of the Vitel product, we are successfully engaging our patients to become more involved in their health care on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. One of the decisions that we made early on for our organization was that the ability of Vitel to reach your patients is very strong, and it's very robust. And one of the things that we made, again, an early decision about is we wanted to reach as many patients as we could, but not bombard them with email after email after email or voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. So for us, when we do campaigns, we try to coordinate in such a way that a patient doesn't get touched any more than 2 times in a 12-month period on campaigns. We think that's enough information that we're asking the patients to take action on, but we are not bombarding them with 4 or 5 emails every month or 2 or 3 phone calls the following month, because patients will get tired of hearing that same message over and over and over. So the distribution of our campaigns you can see here, one of the things that we do is we send a reminder email to every patient who had lab work ordered at a visit. 3 days later, we'll send them an email or a voice message campaign from Vitel that says, hey, just wanted to make sure that you got your lab work done if that was ordered by your provider at your visit. It's important that you get that taken care of as soon as possible. We also do pre-visit yearly campaigns to kind of prep that patient for before they come in for their visit, what they need to have prepared for. For example, things like when was your last mammogram, when was your last colonoscopy, has your health changed, have you seen any new providers, those sorts of things are all on a checklist that gets sent out through our Vitel campaign. We also send a pre-visit checklist for any patient that has diabetes, and that's sent to them 2 days prior to their visit. And then we also send reminders to patients who have not scheduled a yearly exam. We give a patient 13 months from their last yearly exam to schedule their next one. Once they fall outside of that window, so in other words, at month 14, then they'll start getting a letter that says, you are due for your annual exam. Please call our office. Here's why it was important, those sorts of things. So our campaigns are distributed to touch a lot of different parts of our population. We don't concentrate on any particular one part of the population. And again, we made the conscious decision to try to tailor our campaigns to a 2-to-1 relationship. For every one patient, we don't want them getting any more than 2 contacts within a 12-month period. Next slide, please. In our organization, again, we're small, but I think it really can work in any size organization. What we did is we put together a Vitel steering committee when we purchased the product and started using it a little over 2 years ago. In our case, we gathered 3 people in our organization. Myself, I incorporated our front office coordinator, and then our care coordinator as well. And we were called the Vitel Steering Committee or Steering Group. And our job was to make this successful. And what we do then is those people are responsible for coming up with campaigns, deciding what parts of population that we're going to hit, determining the criteria for a campaign's success, those sorts of things. But I think any organization needs to have that steering group so that there's a core group of people that's going to be held responsible. Next slide, please. The other thing that our group or that steering committee made sure we did was make it simple. Vitel has the ability to be very complicated and very laborious, but if you're using it in that fashion, you're not getting the most use out of it. The campaigns that we send every day, and we send campaigns every single day, Monday through Friday, it takes our guru, who's Garrett, about 5 to 7 minutes to pipe those out to our patients. So it's a very simple process. It's not a difficult process. It's very streamlined. Now, and again, the product does have the ability to be much more massive, but we started simple. We've kept it simple for the last 2 years because we saw success in the simplicity in the way that we design campaigns. So we've stuck with that philosophy. Again, it was like playing jacks. We had to learn our onesies before we can go to twosies, threesies, etc. So keep it simple. That was the motto of our steering group. When you're putting together that steering group, you need to think of all members of your organization, not just the logical people. For example, a provider is a logical choice. A care coordinator or clinical coordinator is a logical choice. But you need to make sure to incorporate everybody. Our core group, our steering group, started out as those 3 individuals. I rotate people on that group. So, for example, right now, our care coordinator is not a part of that group, but I have one of our telephone operators as a part of the group. And that helps to bring diversity. It also creates some enthusiasm company-wide for the campaigns because everyone is aware that they're going out. Everyone has input as to what those campaigns look like and those sorts of things. So everyone has taken ownership of the success of using that the product in our office. So again, for us, our group is small, but we rotate who is on that group and who's off that group on a regular basis because it helps to bring diversity, a new flavor, and new ideas. Next slide, please. I came up with the list when I created the group initially, and there's 6 points that they were responsible for. The group initially met every other week. They were charged with the responsibility to create campaigns from scratch. They had to assess each campaign's success and make any changes if it wasn't successful, what changes were needed to be made to make it successful. They brainstormed for campaign ideas, and we're real big on getting more bang for our buck. So, for example, in Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we make sure that there's notices that go out about mammograms. In Colorectal Cancer Screening Month, we make sure that the colorectal messages are sent out. So we piggyback off those things that are already out there in the media and in magazines and television and the newspaper so that the patient gets that connection between, oh, I saw the ad on television. My office or my physician's office offers this service. I may need to call and get that taken care of. We also use our population reports that we get from many of our insurance companies. And we design campaigns around those. For example, if we have a lot of patients who are showing that their A1C is not at an acceptable level, then we will do a campaign design around that to help that patient to increase that awareness of them. I'm sorry, I've lost my place here. Just a second. Okay. And again, what I said earlier, one of the things that we have to do is we change that makeup of that group on a regular basis to add variety and flavor. The second objective that we had to understand that not everybody was going to react to a particular campaign in the same way. I get the next slide, please, there, Adam. In the next slide. We understood that not everybody was going to react to messages the same way. So we make sure that we never send out a written and a voice message on the same campaign because we think that's just you're hitting the patient too hard with that. So you need to choose, am I going to send out this campaign on written or am I going to send it out through a voice messaging system? And for us, the reason we don't do that is the reason that you and I and everybody else dreads some mornings going to our email, especially on a Monday morning. If you go to the next slide, Adam, what you get is a bombardment. And you'll open up your email, and there'll be 49 messages. And what do you do with those 49 messages? Next slide, Adam. You start hitting trash, and you delete those messages. So what I don't want to happen is Charleston Internal Medicine to show up 40 times in someone's inbox on a Monday morning because I know that a patient is not going to read those 40 messages. I want to keep it to one message because otherwise they're just going to hit delete, 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 and that messages are just going to go away and the patient's not, we're going to miss an opportunity for the patient to become engaged in their care. Next slide, please. Again, we also use both written and voice because people don't react to messages and to requests the same way. Some people like that voice. Some people like the written. What we have found out is generally the younger generation, those that are 30 and younger, will like those written messages, and we get a lot of response from that age group. From about 50 years of age and older, we get more response from those that are getting the voice messaging. So we mix it up. We do some voice and some written. We will send the same campaign both ways, but we'll do it at different times. So, for example, in January, we may send a message about the importance of having an LDL done if you have coronary artery disease. That may go out in a written form in January. That same message may go out then in February in the voice method, so that we hopefully are able to reach all those patients and they'll listen to one or react to the other. Again, variety is the spice of life, and you just need to keep that in mind when you're working through your campaigns and coming up with the ideas of how you want to reach out to your patients. The next slide shows you what our actual message looks like for a patient that is overdue for a yearly exam. It's very small. It's very succinct. It's not a lot of verbiage. It basically says, we see that you're overdue for your preventative exam, that you should have one on a regular basis. Here's why it's important. It's, you can early detection and treatment for diseases. We tell them that most of the time their insurance company will probably pay for it. And then their call to action is to call our telephone number at 304-720-2345 and to schedule that important exam. Right now, our annual exam rate is about 83% of all of our patients in the last 12 months have had an annual exam. So we're much better, I've been told, than the national average in that. And FITEL's really helped us to achieve that success. Next slide, please. How to determine if a campaign is successful. To me, this is really important. Our steering committee or group had that responsibility. And for us, each campaign has a different goal. Is the objective of that particular campaign to close care gaps that are out there? Is it to promote an in-house test or procedure? Is it something else? I can tell you the very first campaign that we sent out using FITEL was to fill a patient education class we had for people who had just recently been diagnosed with diabetes. And the class that we had could seat a maximum of 20 people. So our goal was to just fill up that class. We wanted 20 people to respond to a campaign saying, yes, I want to attend that class. We sent out 800, I believe it was 800 messages to patients that were diabetic and had been diagnosed in the last 2 years and had been seen in our office. And we said, we're having a patient education class on the basics of diabetes. If you'd like to attend, please call our office. We were successful. We got those 20 people. We had to send out 800 messages. And for most offices or most organizations, they would say that's a failure. For us, that was a huge success because our only goal was to fill that patient education class with 20 people that wanted to be there. So for us, we were successful right out of the chute. Our criteria was not something big. In other words, we did not send out a campaign that said, we want, 50% of our population to call us. That wasn't our goal. Again, it was very small. 20 out of 800 is all that we wanted. So, set your goals for any particular campaign realistic because you want to be successful. The worst thing you can do is to bomb on your first few because then patients start ignoring messages, but more importantly, your patient or your employees and your providers have little confidence in the ability of the product to be able to produce what I know it can produce. So next slide, please. So don't shoot yourself in the foot is my point here. Set your goal to be realistic on every single campaign and then shoot for that goal and make the campaign tailored around some method to be successful for that. And lastly, we celebrate each and every victory that we have within our organization, and especially with the FITEL campaigns that we send out, not just those people that are on the steering committee. We make sure everybody in our organization knows a brief summary of why a campaign is being done, what the purpose of it is. We make sure they know what the goal of the campaign was. We make sure that everyone is aware of when that goal is reached. And a big one is how is the patient positively impacted? Because again, for us, we use FITEL to inspire the patient to become more involved in their health care on a day-to-day basis. And so we're looking for positive outcomes with the patient. And lastly, we give everyone in our organization a way to remember success. And it can be something very easy. For us, it's a box of $7 donuts. My staff loves donuts. There's a special pastry shop here in town, and they make the best donuts anywhere. So whenever we have a success, I make sure leave a little bit early for work that morning. I make sure and go by that pastry shop, and I buy that box of donuts, and I bring them in. And the staff knows I had to go out of my way to do that, and they're more appreciative of that. But it also, again, it's a time when everyone can come together and celebrate. It's probably the best $7 I ever spend about every month. usually at least 1 or 2 times a month, because the staff knows, okay, we set a goal and we achieved it as an organization. So $7 well spent. Here's just a graph that shows in 2014 our colorectal screenings. If you see over on the left-hand side, January of 2014, each one of these lines represents a different one of my providers. And you can see the increase in colorectal screenings that happened in 2014 from the end of the year to the beginning of the year. Each provider had at least a 20% increase. And so we're ecstatic with this. And this is a direct result of FITEL. We used the FITEL campaign on colorectal screenings, and as soon as we started using it last January, we started seeing those numbers go up. And so, again, 5 or 10 minutes every morning helped get us to this point. It doesn't have to be something difficult or hard. Once you decide on your campaign, use it, be committed to it, tweak it if you need to, but ultimately you can be successful with it, and your patients are going to benefit. So in summary, what we did was we created that FITEL steering group. For us, it was 3 people from different parts of our organization, and we changed up the members on that committee every quarter. Make sure to use both written and verbal campaigns. Pick one or the other on each campaign. Don't use both, but use a variety of both written and oral as you go through that campaign cycle throughout a year. Sometimes just changing the verbiage on a particular campaign will spur one patient to do something that they weren't willing to do the last time they read the message. So, change up those verbiages on your messages on a regular basis. And again, remember, variety is the spice of life. Set realistic goals and then celebrate those goals. Make sure everyone in your organization knows about the campaigns, why you're doing them, what you want to achieve, how the patient's going to be positively impacted. And then when you reach that goal, make sure that you celebrate with everybody in the organization, because, again, that gives everybody some buy-in and responsibility and pride in what's taken place. We'll turn over to Adam.
Terry, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm confident that everyone participating in the webinar learned something from your presentation. I've had the great privilege of watching your group and your team succeed using these campaigns, and so I'm grateful that you were willing to share that with our FITEL community. What I wanted to do now was really just take a few minutes and walk through the process of creating a campaign within FITEL application. I know not everybody participating in the webinar uses the application extensively, so I wanted to just kind of walk through the process and highlight just a couple of key points here. So the first thing when creating a campaign is you need to determine your patient list. The process for creating your patient list is done within the patient management page, which you see here on your screen. And I want to focus on 2 key components here. The first is the filtering section. You can see here. The patient management filtering functionality provides access to more than 60 filtering criteria. So this allows users to create patient lists using patient demographic, clinical, and appointment information. Also notice this plus button here. What this allows users to do is add filter criteria so they can have multiple filtering criteria when generating their list. So let me jump to the other component that I really want to focus here on this page when creating a list. We have what are called saved page views. And so anytime you create a report and you want to be able to use that report over and over and over again, you don't want to have to come to this page and reset the filters all the time. And so what you can do here is once you've set the filters as you'd like, you can come in here and save these filters in what's called a Save Page View. And once you save that, it's always accessible from the drop-down menu up top. And so what that really allows you to do is gain that high efficiency in creating your patient list. As Terry said, they're creating these campaigns daily in 5 to 7 minutes. These saved page views are an excellent way to reach that scalability in kind of quickly generating your list. So once you have your list, you hit the Send Campaign button over here, and that's going to launch you into our Campaign Wizard. And so our Campaign Wizard is a step-by-step process that walks you through everything you need to do to create a campaign. So the next step in this Campaign Wizard is selecting your message. We have here the message library where you can select various phone campaigns that are already pre-recorded, or you can select an email or letter campaign that would be an ad hoc campaign that you would create. So once you have the message that you want from the library, you go to the content page, and this would vary by mode, but in the case of phone, it's quite simple. You'd simply select the provider name and the phone number that you'd want to be included in the message, and then you proceed to your delivery settings. Again, quite simple. You put in the caller ID number that you'd want to have displayed to patients that are receiving the call, and then you would be able to select the start date for your campaign. And once you've completed all of these steps for setting up the campaign, you go to the overview page. And this is really just a nice one-page summary of the campaign that you've created. So you can kind of see all the details there. And then also one of the key things here is that you can send yourself a test campaign. So whether that's email or phone, you can send yourself a test before you finalize that campaign. So this is really just kind of a brief overview of the campaign process. We do have detailed training materials. If you need help accessing those training materials, please contact your client, your account manager, or FITEL's client care team. So I'd like to, one, say thank you for participating, and then also would like to open it up for Q&A here.
Great, thanks, Adam. At this time, if you do have any questions, please use the question box in the lower right-hand panel of your screen, and we'll go ahead and start populating those questions. And again, Terry and Adam, obviously, there is some complexity to the system, but as Terry mentioned, this is very simple in the way that Charleston internal medicine started out. Really took the simplistic approach, and taking 5 to 10 minutes a day to get real results, as he has showed everybody. There's a 20% increase in getting patients into that office, so pretty significant, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us today for not only clients of VITEL who are interested in leveraging this product, but also for those who are interested in just contacting VITEL for questions about leveraging our solutions, not only this particular one, but others. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Adam, I see there are a few questions in the queue here. Do you want to go ahead and start reading a few and directing them either to Terry, or you could probably answer a few yourself?
Sure, yep. So first question, Terry, this is for you. Who did you have to include in your organizational leadership to pursue use of this system?
For us, we have one provider that's kind of our lead physician, and when we became involved with VITEL, I did all the research and everything, and then went to that lead physician and said, here's a product I think that we can use cost-effectively and efficiently in our organization to engage patients. Kind of went through it with him, about a 10-minute overview. He gave it his blessing, and we moved forward. In a larger organization, obviously, it's not going to be quite that simple. But again, for us, we have a lead physician that we look to give blessing to these type of things.
Great. Next question, Terry, again for you. Do you collect patient feedback on the messaging?
We do. We actually do patient surveys on a regular basis, and one of the questions on that survey is, did you receive a message regarding your health care, asking you to take some action? And if the patient answers yes, then they drop to another question that says, was the question clear, or was the information clear for you? Did you take action? How did you get that message? Did you get it verbally or by voice? I'm sorry, verbally or by written message? And so we look at that information. I can tell you that in all the messages we've sent out and the surveys that we've gotten back, we have yet to have a negative response from a patient that says, don't send me those messages anymore, or that's an annoying message, or anything like that. All the responses we've had back from patients have all been positive, and they like that reminder of something that they needed to do in regards to their health. So it's been positive response back from our patients.
Great. So another question here. Terry and I can probably both answer this. I'll take a stab at it first, and Terry, if you have additional comments, feel free to chime in thereafter. But the question is this: how do you monitor the frequency of contact per patient in order to maintain the 2-to-1 ratio? So within the application, there is a communication history component to that. And so what you can do is you can see when the patient was last communicated to, and you can filter on that. And so within the application, when you're generating that list, you can then exclude patients that have recently been communicated to, and so that way you're just focusing on those patients that have not received a communication within a certain time period. So, Terry, I don't know if you have other ways that you use.
That's exactly what we do. There are certain messages, for example, if we're going to be participating in a health fair in our community, we do not count that particular message in that 2-to-1 ratio because we're not asking the patient to make any call to action about their health. We're sending out that message to say, we're going to be at such and such place participating in this health fair. You know, if you would like to take advantage of it, please feel free to stop by our booth and take it, and take in all the offerings of our community at that place. So if we send out a message like that, it does not count in our 2-to-1 ratio because we're not actually asking the patient to call to action for something that they need to do specifically. But otherwise, we do exactly what Adam, said. We watch that on a regular basis.
Great. Next question here, and the questions are pouring in here, so I can tell that we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can here. One is regarding the saved page views. So the question is this: saved page views visible from the top. Do you have specific suggestions that capture diabetes care, colon cancer, and other screenings? A couple things about that. The saved page view, generally within the implementation process within FITEL, we can work with the organization to kind of set up the views that you would like. Also, at any point in time, FITEL users have access through their client care team or through their account management to really kind of receive assistance on creating these saved page views. We do have a lot of examples or samples, I guess, of what other clients are using, and so working through some of the nuances that are specific to your organization, we can create the saved page view that you want.
I can tell you from our perspective, we used the generic ones to start with, and then after we had a good analysis and kind of forecasted the kind of reaction we would get, we then tweaked them a little bit, and FITEL was just wonderful to work with us on that. Very hands-on with us, as well as campaigns. I mean, when we designed a campaign and had the verbiage and everything, they were very quick in response to helping us get that loaded into the system and implemented in a quick method. So kudos to FITEL for that. Great organization when it comes to responsiveness, I can tell you that.
Here, Terry, another question for you here. Do you focus on preventive campaigns or chronic disease campaigns, and which one have you seen better results with?
We've had great success on our preventative side. Our colorectal screenings, our breast cancer screenings, and our wellness exams, we've had a great response on those. Specifically diabetes, it is a hit and miss in our area. In West Virginia, we're the most obese, we have high blood pressure, we have diabetes, and most of our population has something to do with their heart. So we're not a healthy group. So for us, we hear those messages all the time. And so we really try to encourage our patients and use the campaigns on the preventative side, because we know if we can get them in here on the preventative side, we can start addressing some of those other issues. So preventative, we really hit hard on, really hit hard on those.
Thanks, Terry. Another question, what were the challenges that you faced in implementing FITEL in this campaign process?
For us, the biggest obstacle was just the ability of the system and understanding it enough to make it simple for us. It wasn't buying in, getting our physicians to buy in. It wasn't getting our staff to buy in. We've collected email and phone, cell phone, telephone numbers and email addresses for our patients for about the last 6 years. So we had just never used them before. So when that first message went out, I think patients were a little caught off guard by it. Oh, wait a minute, I've never had this message before, or any communication by email from the practice. And so they were very inquisitive initially. And so for us, that implementation from a patient side was very easy for us, and inside from an organization. But understanding the FITEL product and the magnitude that you could outreach with it, we really just had to grasp our mind around that and make it simple for us. So for us, it was just pulling that magnitude down into simple steps. And we look at that today. I mean, we're simple with it today. It can do more than what we're doing with it, but we're using it simple right now.
Great. Thank you. We've also had a lot of questions and comments just stating thank you, so we appreciate the feedback there, and we'll keep working through the questions here. So this is a question. Can you talk more about how to identify patients for a campaign? That's a really good question. Let me cover that in a general sense, and then Terry, maybe you can give some practical information about how you guys go about identifying patients for a campaign. So working with various clients on identifying their patients, one of the first things that we always look at is we look at the objective of the campaign. And so when we're starting out, we're saying, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want to solve here using this campaign functionality? And we kind of start kind of working backwards from that. And so with 60-plus filters, we generally have all of the information that we need to identify the patient list. It's then just kind of working through the process of saying, okay, asking more and more questions to make sure that we have the right population. So we can look to say, okay, now that we have the right demographic criteria, do we have the right clinical criteria? Okay, once we've solved that, do we have the right appointment data? For example, you may not want to communicate to a patient that's going to be coming in next week if you already have you may not want to send a preventive measure or message to them if they're already coming in. And so we just kind of keep working through the path of asking questions, looking at the different filter options to really kind of hone in on that patient list. And that's generally how we see patient lists become created, and then also I think improve over time. We see those questions kind of say, oh, well, we didn't really think about this. Let's go in and update that list. And with the Save Page View concept there, you can always update those. And so you can take your existing Save View, add a new filter, take away an existing filter, or just modify it. Terry, anything you'd like to add there on how you guys identify your patients for a campaign?
We do that. We did that initially a lot. In the last probably 6 to 9 months, we've really started using our patient population reports that we get from our various insurance companies. to help us decide what kinds of campaigns that we need to create and do. For example, we get a dashboard from our local Blue Cross and Humana and our Aetna panels that says X percent of your population has had, of diabetes population has had an A1C in the last 12 months. And we look for patterns in those. So, for example, in our diabetic population, if those numbers are low for those carriers, then we know we need to do a better job of outreaching to our patients to help them, help us remember they need that particular testing done. And so we've really kind of moved some towards looking at our insurance carrier population reports to help us determine this is a particular segment of the population that we need to reach out to. And that's 2 years ago, we would have not been able to do that because it was something we just didn't have our hands wrapped around now. But with Vitel, it's really helped us to hone down and look at those type things. And again, we also use the month designations, the health month designations, because we think we get real bang for the buck out of piggybacking off those. So when the breast cancer messages come across your local newspaper because your local breast cancer walk or Susan G. Komen walk is this Saturday, we make sure our breast cancer messages are going out about 3 weeks prior to that event, because that is going to be in the forefront of the female's mind of that situation. So we really look to those designated health months too to help guide us on campaigns for any particular period. And I think that's how we're able to be, real successful at this too. Is we don't venture out there alone. We piggyback off of what somebody else is doing and just tag us along with it.
Thank you, Terry. Another question here. I think this is a really good question. It says, if you only send out 2 campaigns per patient, how do you prioritize which campaigns?
For us, it's an assumed thing that everyone's going to get a preventative message of some sort. So for us, we make that assumption that everybody is going to get, or we create the campaign in such that everybody gets some sort of preventative. And then we look at a disease state for the second message. So blanket-wide, practice-wide, they're going to get some sort of preventative. And then at the disease state level, then is where we look for that other message to come from. Because, again, for us, preventative is real key. If I can get them into the office, we can start talking about the disease states and improvement in their health and those sorts of things. So getting them here on that preventative level really gives us the opportunity to do a whole bunch of other stuff with them.
Great. Another question, I think, Terry, this is in reference to the graph that you showed for the colonoscopy success that you had and the dramatic positive results that you saw there. The question is this: how long did it take before you saw those positive outcomes? So when you started running your campaigns, how long did it take until you started realizing that?
Our campaign for the colorectal started in December. And so we started, for me, that baseline was really January, and then it really started going up. So after about 60 days is when we really started to see the increase go. And we continued that for about 6 months. Now, we've kind of leveled out, and it's kind of like we picked the easy cherries off the tree, the low-hanging fruit in that first 6 months. And so now it's a little bit more difficult. We are definitely at a point where we need to change up that colorectal screening message to try to spur some new individuals to take some action. And so when I go back to my steering group this next quarter, this will be one of the things I sit down with them and I say, okay, here's what it looks like for the last 12 months for our colorectal cancer screening. We've kind of leveled out. What are we going to do to reach out to those patients now that ignored our first message? How can we tweak this? How can we reword it? How can we make it look different so that they can hopefully react and call to action and make that phone call to our office and get those things done, whether it's a colonoscopy or an annual exam where there's a fecal occult blood done, whatever that happens to be. So we look generally, as a general rule, it's about a 60-day window from when the campaign goes till we really start to see the impact of it. Some patients will react very quickly, others it's just about 60 days. But in 60 days, we can definitely see, is our campaign successful, is it not, what do we got to do?
Great. Yeah, and I liked your comment there kind of about changing things up, because we've seen your growth on, particularly with the colorectal cancer screening, that graph that you showed was very dramatic initially, and as you became successful and you as you mentioned, you covered the low-hanging fruit, it now becomes a little bit more challenging to kind of continue to get better and better and better. It's there's a little bit of a harder challenge there. But I think to answer this question too, is it really depends on the campaign that you're running and what the goals are. I liked in Terry's presentation that he said, they set realistic goals. And so one of the things I think is you're starting out down this path, or you're already in this path and you're trying to improve it, is really just saying, okay, what's our goal and when do we want to achieve it, and making those realistic, and then depending on the whether it's preventive or whether you're dealing with chronic care, those two, you may have variations in how long it's going to take to actually achieve those goals. Some might be very quick, and some may take a little bit longer.
Definitely, and again, that's why you got to set a goal for each campaign. You can't say our goal is always to have 80% regardless of what the campaign is, because that's not going to be realistic from one campaign to another. So I think that really helps everyone to buy into it by setting these realistic goals for each one of them. And again, our first campaign sent out 800 messages. All I wanted was 20 people. That's all I wanted. When we got to 20, that was success for me.
Yeah. Another question here regarding kind of the filtering capacity. The question is this: can you filter patients by insurance carrier? The direct answer to that is yes. And I know there's questions regarding filtering. Again, if you are an existing FITEL client and you use the software, I encourage you to talk to your account manager or the client, our client care team here. We have ample training material there. The webinar is probably not really the venue for us to walk through the numerous different filtering capacities that you have available through the tool. But those training guides and help from your client care team member or account manager we can definitely help you use those filtering options or optimize them for you. Okay, let me keep going through here some questions. So here's a question. It says, how is patient contact information maintained within the FITEL system? I can address that here. And there's several components to this. And I'll talk about first just the patient information. So this is like phone number, email address. We're linked with your practice management system or your EHR, and we're receiving that patient communication over, depending on how we have it set up within your organization. But we're constantly getting updates from your data feeds, and we have your patient phone number, email address. As those change on your side, they will update on our side. The other component to this is communication preferences. That works in a very similar fashion. As patients, define their communication preference by mode, that also then gets captured within FITEL and is updated accordingly. And within the application, another filter is the communication preference. So you can go in and you can filter patients based off of their preference and deliver the campaign message in the mode of communication that is preferred by the patient. So that is available as well. keep going here through. Let me do a time check here. There's a lot of questions I think we're just not going to be able to get to. So let me see if I can find a couple more that we can address in the time, and then I'll turn it back over to Renee. Another question here about the filtering regarding appointment date. The question is, if I want to filter for an appointment before a certain date, do I put the filter in as less than? Yes, that is an option. So you can really just kind of filter based off of greater than, less than, equal to if you want a specific day, within 1 week. There's date ranges, so if you want to specify specific date ranges, you can do that as well. And so in terms of appointment filtering, really you can filter it in any way you can think of. So here's a good. Oh, Renee, can I just answer this one question, because that's a really good question, and I want to just before we end.
No, go right ahead. Go ahead.
So the question is regarding Terry, you guys kind of work maybe at a smaller scale compared to what this question is asking for. They have a very, very large practice or health system, and some of their questions are regarding managing campaigns with large patient panels. And so this is a really good question. A couple things that we can look at and talk about. One of the key things that often comes up with wanting to send large campaigns or large volumes of campaigns is that isn't often thought about in the initial process is how do you have the capacity to to process the incoming traffic that is a result of those campaigns. So just for an example, if you were to send out flu, influenza messages through a campaign, and you wanted to reach 500,000 patients, one of the fundamental questions that you'd have to ask is, well, do I have the capacity to handle that? Not only just from patients calling back in, but also the foot traffic. Do I have the capacity? So generally, some of the approaches that people take are, they really kind of try to take these larger populations and manage them at a more kind of smaller segment. So whether that's by a group of providers or a practice or, maybe age bands within the group. And so they really kind of try to take that larger population and subdivide it into smaller populations and work to manage those smaller populations so they're not trying to have to do everything all at once. And I think that really kind of fits in with what Terry was mentioning about kind of starting simple and focusing on the simplicity aspect of it is kind of, if you can take that and break those up into smaller groups, it becomes much more manageable. Terry, I'm going to stop here. I know we had other questions. I'm going to turn the time back over to you. Or I'm sorry, Renee.
Oh, okay, great. Terry, was there anything else that you wanted to add to that last question?
I was just going to say that we've done exactly that. We've sent out particular campaigns by provider because of a anticipated volume problem. So, in a large organization, you could maybe do it by office location, but definitely the system has the ability to do that and to do it still efficiently.
Okay, great. And again, there are a lot of questions that are still coming in, and I'm noticing that these questions are more specific to the product itself, a lot of clients. So as Adam had mentioned, what we'll do is we're going to go through all the questions, and we're going to make sure that we pair these up. Either Adam will respond, or I'll get with your account or sales representative to follow up with you. And of course, you have my contact information, so if for some reason your questions do not get answered in a timely fashion, feel free to reach out to myself, Renee Talbert. With that, I want to go ahead and thank both Terry and Adam for their time today. This information was extremely valuable for these attendees. We could just see from some of the responses that we're getting back through the queue. So thank you once again. And as a reminder, everyone will receive a follow-up email that includes the presentation and the link to the recording within 48 hours after the conclusion of this webinar. And if you can, when you log out, please take the brief survey just to let us know how we were doing. This lets us know whether or not we need to improve or do things slightly different to make sure that this time that we spend together is more effective. And finally, we will have another executive webinar on May 15th from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be on lean care management and automation, and the presenters include our subject matter experts, Jerry Green, who is the Vice President of Applied Quality, and Karen Handmaker, who is the Vice President of Population Health Strategies here at Vital. Once again, thank you for your time again today. This concludes our webinar. I will go ahead and end the recording, and then we will conclude everything. So please have a great day, and thank you again for attending. Take care.